Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon at our plenary session. And as our moderator said, we've got a super panel going here. I don't know if we're going for a record, but I think he said 20 may have been a previous record, so I don't think we're quite there. I'm Francisco Oaxaca. I'm the Chief of Communications and Community Relations for LA Care Health Plan. And for those of you that aren't familiar with LA Care, it's the largest publicly operated health plan in the country. We serve almost 2.6 million members in Los Angeles County, providing most of them with Medi-Cal health coverage. Now, I know that really is not helpful explaining what the heck I'm doing here at a Move LA conference, so I figure I at least owe all of you a little bit of an explanation. In a previous life, I worked for Metrolink for 17 years. And I led their communications, community relations efforts. So that really embedded this work of public transportation into my DNA, and it's something that's carried forward into my work even now. One of the benefits that Medi-Cal members receive as part of their healthcare coverage that many folks are not aware of is free transportation to medical appointments and for other medically necessary purposes. So in many ways, operating behind the scenes, every health plan in California that offers Medi-Cal coverage has to provide free transportation to all their members. LA Care delivers up to 400,000 trips per month to its members to get them around Los Angeles County to medical appointments for medical testing, to be delivered home or to another care facility after they're discharged from the hospital, for x-rays, to pick up their prescriptions. And it really is, in many ways, more than some of what our municipal operators do on a monthly basis. And that's what keeps me tied to Move LA and to serving on the leadership board, because we are such an integral part of moving individuals throughout the county. And it's, I think, that shared interest in not only improving our transit systems, but supporting an equitable healthcare system. Our second plenary today has a question as a title, and it's one that hopefully will lead to some really aspirational answers from this group to answering that question. With a boatload of dollars, could LA build and rebuild for clean air and climate health? You can pretty much guarantee, look forward to a very dynamic conversation about how we address health equity and as it relates to goods and people movement in our region. It is a large panel, but there is a method to that. As our moderator likes to say, this is coalition building in real time. And our moderator needs no introduction. You can see his name tag up there, but I still have to mention Denny Zane, the founder of Move LA, who will be leading our conversation today. So applause for Denny, please. Our panelists are already before you, and I'd just like to introduce them formally so you get up. See if it connects. There we go. That's the level of my tech support sometimes, is turn something off and turn them back on. You want to? Okay, if that works for you, Denny, that's fine. Denny will take care of introductions as he calls on them, and he's got plenty of questions to keep them busy. Thank you again for being with us this afternoon.
I would say, indeed, there is method to our madness here in terms of having a large panel. It's all dates back to how we started Measure R. In a moment in time when we really had less than 3 weeks to get a coalition together, to champion legislation, to authorize LA Metro to go to the ballot. And we found out, we figured we needed to have the experts on a panel and the coalition leaders on a panel, hearing each other speaking in public about the idea. And the magic of that moment was everybody saw these people together, those people at that time together, agree about the need for a measure to address transportation in Los Angeles County. And so we've been following a similar model. Now, it doesn't mean I expect agreement from everybody. No way. What it means is we expect to see a convergence of purpose where there may be differences, but there are also clear lines of agreement and opportunities to address differences, out of which we hope a real coalition might emerge, okay? Organizing in real time, in public, instead of behind the scenes. So I'm going to do a little setup of the issue we're trying to address here first before we start asking our panelists to address it themselves. We all know LA County is the center of air pollution, the emissions challenge in America. We are also probably the center of a lot of its solutions. Okay. Well, I don't work, so. We want to pose the question here, if you had a boatload of money, and I'm going to use $1 billion a year as an example, just to make it clear, Measure R was $1.2 billion a year and Measure N. So this is about the ballpark of previous efforts. But we want to figure out how would you best use that money to restore clean air and to restore climate health. Everybody needs to keep in mind that with respect to climate, there's a fancy word up here, Atlantic meridian. Someone's got to say it for me. This is that prospect that the Gulf current heading north from the Gulf of Mexico might slip at some point because of changing atmosphere, changing climate conditions, and transform our planet. That prospect is much nearer than any of us would ever care to consider. We also need to make progress on the long-standing air pollution problems that we have in Southern California, the worst of which is diesel. While we're watching our climate change accelerating, some people call what happened in Altadena and in Palisades a fire event. You should first think of it as a wind event, because that's the climate conditions drove those fires to be so powerful. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, we had a good partner developing in Washington, obviously no longer. So we want to talk about prioritizing our investments. If we had a boatload of money, how would we do it to best address on an accelerated basis air pollution and climate emissions? Of course, we must also invest in protecting our communities against the worst implications. When I was the director of the Coalition for Clean Air back in 1993 and walked in the door, the staff scientist said to me, everything starts with the emissions inventory. You got to know where the emissions come from if you're going to have a strategy to remedy. This is the emissions inventory for Southern California for nitrous oxides, which are the precursor of the ozone. If you were to have a close look at this, you would understand when I say 90% of our NOx emissions come from three sources: power generation, gasoline-powered light-duty vehicles, and largely diesel-powered heavy-duty vehicles. Most of our smog from those categories. When you look at the emissions inventory for greenhouse gases, the same three sources pop up as the big three. Not 90%, but 60% of the greenhouse of the CO2. That suggests, or should suggest to us, that if we were to do smart investments in those three categories, we could make a big benefit both on our air quality and on our climate. Three big sources: power generation, trucks, off-road truck vehicles, and cars and pickups. So that suggests to us, what I'm suggesting to you, is that our priorities for spending the money, if we are thinking about how do we accelerate progress against climate change and air pollution ought to be making sure that our power is 100% renewable emission free and making sure that our transportation system is 100% zero emission as well. Doing these things will give us the biggest bang for our buck. And it turns out probably as well, and this is crucial, in the shortest period of time. Because these are technologies which, compared to other technologies, built environment technologies, for example, these technologies, the ones that exist now, the fossil-based technologies, those will turn over more quickly than other sources of emissions do. Vehicle cars, 12, 15 years, trucks, 15 to 20 years. So you get a rapid rate of change, which means that the marketplace is more readily able to adapt to new technologies if you have a good strategy. And that's a crucial point. However, we also need to pay attention to something that's not a fossil fuel source for carbon at all. It's called short-lived climate pollutants, otherwise known as super pollutants. The most important of which, or the star of the show, I suppose, is methane. And methane, as it turns out, is a much more powerful climate forcer than carbon. But the good news is it decays much more quickly in the atmosphere. What that means is if we do a good job of reducing short-lived climate pollutants, super pollutants, we can have a bigger impact more quickly on fighting back climate change. And if we don't do it, we ain't going to get anywhere at all. Because carbon lasts for 200 years. We've got to do this in order for our carbon reductions to make the benefits that we need from them. We also should know that our economy needs more power anyway, right? We need more power because AI is coming. We certainly will need more power to avoid brownouts. But we also need more power to enable our transportation system to turn over to zero emissions, whether it's electric or electrolytic hydrogen. We need more power, period. And we need it to be zero emission. The good news is, and this is really good news, I think, is that the technology, the vehicles themselves, or the renewable power themselves, problem solved in the sense that we have zero emission technologies that could compete with all the fossil fuel technologies in these areas now. They're not all heavily deployed yet. Renewable power is pretty heavily deployed. We're about 40, almost 50% renewable power. EVs, light duty, is pretty heavily deployed now. We all know that those vehicles can outperform gasoline already. That's good news. 15 years ago wasn't true. We didn't know what we were going to do. We also should know that on the heavy-duty trucking side and goods movement technologies, while battery electric will work in some, especially like drayage trucks and short-haul trucking, electrolytic hydrogen fuel cells will work as an alternative to diesel now. We have got, in terms of the vehicles and equipment, we've got what we need. It's no longer rocket science. I remember how not very long ago, how confusing it was. Oh, climate change, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? The majority of the emissions, the technologies to address that, are now operating in the marketplace. Unfortunately, at least the hydrogen fuel cell side, not very many of them, but they work. So, what are the barriers to zero emission transportation? We need more charging. We need to create electrolytic hydrogen infrastructure, and we need more power. For our purposes, what we're asserting, and what comment from our panelists, we're asserting that these are the three big investments if we had a boatload of money. Not the only investments, perhaps. We do have to fight fires. Right? We may need to give incentives for people to buy the vehicles, especially low-income people and mom-and-pop operators. But in technology, that's our three big categories. Therefore, we say this is a build, build, build program where we have to invest money and build out our clean power, build out our EV charging, and build out for heavy-duty vehicle purposes an electrolytic hydrogen infrastructure system. And if we do that on an accelerated basis, we could turn things around so long as we also provide incentives for the vehicles and address short-lived climate pollutants. We have some people here who are expert on each of these category areas to talk with us and give us their opinion about these different things, and we're going to turn it to them shortly. But it's important to also recognize that if we have to build, 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 that's a jobs, jobs, jobs program. And many of these jobs will be union jobs. That means that we've got an opportunity for a constituency coalition that could include environmental community and the building trades and the labor movement, as well as other industries to see this as part of their future as well. All we need is a boatload of money. Right? We thought maybe for a while that the state cap and trade money could be a good alternative. The governor may revise the budget for GGRF going forward, and it's about $4 to $5 billion a year, of which he's proposing about $2.5 billion for high-speed rail and fighting fires, leaving 1.5 to 2 or so billion left for other purposes. Will they get to invest in what we're suggesting our priorities here? Hey, they have $800 million in affordable housing. It's the only affordable housing pot in the state budget. So I'm not sure we want to divert that. You know, transit operators are in desperate need for the transit operations money, also in that same pot. I'm not sure whether the legislative process is going to be able to create for us the resources we need to build, 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 as we're suggesting. But the voters could. So we're considering this. There's no measure here before us. There's an idea. As we always do. We do the measure later. We want to hear what the experts and the coalition partners think before we get busy writing a measure. You know how much work that is? Do it later. The good news about such a thing is that if we're smart and do our politicking and programming right, this is a majority vote opportunity, not a 2/3. Now, if you look at these measures here, there are 5 measures here that move LA, 4 of which we were part of starting. I have to give our mayors the role they're just due. We were like the outside game. And Mayor Villaraigosa and Mayor Garcetti were like the inside game. And we coalesced to make R&M happen. Mark Ridley Thomas was the inside game. We were the outside game on Measure H. And the outside game is pretty crucial because the political leaders don't start the campaign on the inside unless they know there's going to be an outside game. So that's the role we have played. Same role with Measure ULA, although that's almost even more specific because there were no politicians involved. It was all outside game. But we've done this before successfully. There are about $4 billion a year being generated by measures that we sponsored or worked on. Measure A, we were part of the team, and a big part of the campaign team, but it's somebody else's idea. And so, United Way, thank you. And the United Way team, it was their big idea. So majority vote, although it must be said, the Howard Jarvis group is trying to qualify a measure for this statewide ballot to get rid of the majority vote. They're so upset about that, right? We think we can beat them. We would have to beat them in any event just to protect what we have. Having another campaign in LA County to help motivate voters in a low turnout election will help us beat them. So that, what we're talking about here is part of our opportunity to protect our majority vote. And here is an outline of an idea of what a measure might spend money on. If we had $1 billion a year, now we could do a 1/4% sales tax. There's a legal opportunity for that. That would be $600 million, $600 million a year. That's the fallback as far as I'm concerned. We're looking for better, right? We know we can win that. 1/4% sales tax is passed 80% of the time. So that would not be, the signature drive might be a heavy lift, but otherwise we could win that. Okay. But we want more because the challenge is more. Here's what we are suggesting to you and to our panel that our priorities should be. We think foundational is renewable power because everything is not only one of the major emission sources, everything needs the power to operate. Our whole economy is growing, needs more power. We've got to do that. We've got to fight fires or prepare ourselves to be fire resistant. Heavy duty vehicles is our big emission source that we've got to stop. It's not only air pollution. Within the diesel emissions, there are other short-lived climate pollutants that are very powerful, not methane, but black carbon, ozone produced by all those things are also super pollutants. And so diesel ends up being like our biggest, most challenging and important emission. And so it's up there at the top in terms of money. Light-duty vehicles and infrastructure, still very important. Some people think maybe this is too much for that. We're already far down the road. We've already got progress there. That's a discussion item. But we also have to reduce super pollutants. Some people will say we need to do more there. And that's what I'm waiting for our audience to tell us. Should we consider other expansion of transit and bicycle pedestrian infrastructure as well? Strategies to get vehicles off the road so we aren't, reduce VMT. That should be on the table. Let's have a discussion. And that's really kind of where we are. If you look on your seat, you'll see something like that on the back here, right? And I want to get our panelists telling us, Denny, Zane, are you still smoking that stuff? No, didn't you grow out of that when you were mayor or something? And I've never stopped smoking the good stuff for the future. You know what I'm saying? It's like we always need to have our best imagination when we're thinking about these challenges. This is the big stuff. And so let's talk about it. I'm going to first ask, I think Joe Lyou is the right place to start here because Joe is executive director of the Coalition for Clean Air. And they've been fighting this fight for 50 years, huh? 54, but he's counting. Joe hasn't been there for 54 years. He doesn't look old enough to do that. But Joe, what's your best advice about this? Do you think we're wacko or are we onto something?
Well, I could argue with you over specifics, Denny, but basically the idea is the only way we're getting there is to invest, right? And to build. I agree with you 100% on that. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right to focus on diesel because for us, the criterion is if we're going to do this, what's going to save the most lives? And diesel emissions are the thing that are killing people. California, about 5,000 people per year die prematurely just because they breathe the air. That's about 1 in every 8,000 people. You know how many people get murdered every year in California? 1 in every 21,000 people, roughly. So if we're going to make investments, they're going to pay dividends. We should invest in the things that's going to save lives. That's reducing these diesel exhaust categories. Some of these I'd argue with a little bit, Denny, but I'm not going to because it's a giant panel. But the inventory is going to look different years from now than what Denny put up there. But that's because I focus on the inventory too, just like you were told to when you started my job. But this is what we need to do. You're absolutely right. Technology is not the problem. Infrastructure is. So we need to invest and we need to build.
So this is a build program.
Yeah, we're totally on board with build.
All righty. So, then Bryn, Moncelsi from Climate Resolve. So Joe over there, he's like an air quality guy. You need like the climate stuff, right? What do you think? Am I off my noodle here?
In the best way, maybe. Thinking bold, thinking big. I think you put a little something for everyone in here. Not leaving things off the table. I think it's strategic. You've got super pollutants in there. You've got bike ped transit in there. You've got fire prevention, which we've only come to realize all the more importance of getting upstream and getting some of that preparedness prevention. There's this saying, an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. So if we can be smart and do what needs to be done to prevent the real big disasters, which we know are otherwise coming, path is that precedent, and it's really on us to get ahead of it and define what our new normal is.
We want a different new normal, right? We don't want to worry about the Gulf current. I'm a 77-year-old father of a 27-year-old son. I don't think I'm going to have to worry about the Gulf current, but I don't want him to worry about it either. And that stuff is far too imminent than any of us, I think, fully appreciate. So we have today with us from Earthjustice, Fernando Gaytan. Adrian Martinez not able to make it. Where are you? Oh, there. Nixon. Good.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Although I play him on TV sometimes, so we're going to go ahead and adjust this a bit. My name is Fernando. What's that? Oh, better glasses. All right. Well, I'll tell him that. Yeah, we'll send it to my optometrist. Fernando Gaytan, I'm a senior trader at Justice. I work out of our LA office, and I'm part of our Right to Zero campaign at Justice, which is an initiative to really look at the way we move people, goods, power, and heat our homes, all to transition to zero emissions, from fossil fuel polluting technologies to zero emissions. So, of course, this definitely resonates. But like Joe, I have a slightly different approach to the build initiative that I think is still really important. Our work is often centered around working with environmental justice communities, with tribal partnerships, with folks who are on the ground experiencing the day-to-day polluting effects of freight infrastructure. And so for us, it's really important to, as we're thinking about and really focusing on how to invest this, we're hearing from a lot of folks, and this is something that Joe alluded to, we're hearing from folks like, where is the ROI? Where is the return on investment? And what they mean by that is not the next shiny new object, but where is the emission reduction that we're expecting to get? How are we changing that inventory that we talked about earlier so that we see zeros across the board as opposed to these high levels? And so really what we're looking for is, there's been a lot of money poured into trying to solve this problem. We need money coupled with real guidelines on how to reduce emissions, commitments to emission reduction targets, so that we're actually going in the right direction. I also have to say, though, you heard from former Senator Vanessa Delgado in the last panel, I believe. She's the chair of the ACMD, this Air Quality Management District for Southern California, South Coast Air Quality Management District. And we were part of the process of working with staff to develop their air quality management plan, essentially their blueprint for the types of measures that they would take
to improve air quality across the region, a region of 17 million people across 4 counties. This is huge. This is almost half the state here in this air basin. And as part of that AQMP, they identified 5 facility-based multiple source measures that would get at what essentially is a web of pollution from hubs like warehouses, rail yards, the ports, and airports. And it is, I mentioned that because it does sort of give us sort of a roadmap for thinking about investment, thinking about like, let's think about where we invest those dollars first. Let's focus on infrastructure first, and then move on to the types of vehicles and shiny new objects that we want. But the infrastructure is going to be key because that has been, as we have heard, the impediment to rolling out these zero emission solutions. And so we need to really focus on where do we focus that energy. We've got a roadmap here in Southern California. Let's focus on those hubs, those pollution hubs. But importantly, I think there's also a really, we have to really think about our history. You mentioned Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa, and it made me think about the Alameda Corridor. When the Alameda Corridor was first proposed, it was touted as the potential of being a zero emissions corridor, electrified freight movement that would reduce or eliminate polluting technology from that corridor and alleviate the pollution burden for hundreds of thousands of people along that corridor. Let's look at those commitments that we made in the past and start there. Let's not start from scratch. Let's make sure that we develop the zero emissions that we've already committed to, and double down on that and hold people accountable. Not just write a check and walk away, but hold people accountable and make sure we get the emission reductions we need. And then third, this is really important. I know you mentioned expediting these solutions, and here's the part where I'm going to push back a little bit. We can't, for the sake of expediency, roll back on the opportunities that frontline communities have to voice their concerns when projects are being built. And we can't afford to endorse streamlining for the sake of expediency. Robust community engagement early and often is the solution to our zero emissions infrastructure planning. We've seen examples of this through the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, right, LAC, and their pilot project with environmental justice communities along the 710 corridor, where communities were brought in to be co-designers of zero emissions charging infrastructure before plans were even put into place. We can't steamroll our CEQA guidelines or California Environmental Quality Guidelines just to get these projects built. We've got to make sure communities involved, communities educated, communities at the table, co-designing these projects so that we get solutions that actually meet the needs of those communities that are most burdened. I'll pass it back to you.
Fernando, thank you. So what I've heard from you, tell me if I'm wrong, is that the outline that we've laid out, I've laid out here, is consistent, but there are some additional commitments and elaborations that need to be made to ensure that, in addition to clean air, we're getting justice.
Yes, I also see that you've got on number 6 transit and transit as part of the projects. I want to do a plug for the LA County Electric Truck and Bus Coalition, which I'm a part of, is doing a webinar on next Tuesday, the 20th of May, and invite everyone to join. I'll leave these flyers out, and it's being co-sponsored by Jobs Move America, IBW, East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice, and the Sierra Club. So I welcome you to join us to talk about the solutions around transit and going zero emissions.
As you know, that's close to our hearts as well. So I want to introduce Dr. Ramanathan from UC San Diego the Scripps Institute. But I want you to all know that I think I'm introducing to you a real hero. One of the people who has been most responsible for standing up and letting us all know that it's not just about carbon, that these super pollutants have got to be a co-equal focus of our attention, etc. And I learned whoever heard of short-lived climate pollutants until you read it from Dr. Ramanathan. And that's really an heroic contribution to our thinking in our plan, and I'd like to give you, Dr. Romano, an opportunity to give us your observations here. Are we heading in the right direction, or we need to adjust, or what? What do you think? Oh, you should have a microphone right there.
Thank you, Dr. Zane, for that generous introduction. Can you all hear me? Great. Just going to say a minor part of the short-lived climate pollutants, and then move on to what I want to share with you. But the short-lived climate pollutants, methane, black carbon, which comes from diesel trucks, the black smoke is basically black carbon. And these four pollutants contributing about 50% of the global warming. All right. And but focus now enormously on the carbon dioxide. And don't get me wrong, we need to cut the carbon emissions. Why? They stay in the air for a century to 1,000 years. Oh, I tend to fidget with my fingers. Thank you. One thing not many are aware, here so far we talk mainly about emission reductions. It's vital, but emission reductions benefit globally. So if you just take an extreme example, we are the only one cutting down emissions, and the rest of the planet doesn't, our warming would be just the same or even more. Okay? So what's happened is that I started working on this 50 years ago, before many of you were born. And I switched to solutions. I've been waiting for 30 years. I worked with the United Nations, our U.S. President's office, etc., etc., etc. It's not reducing fast. So we need a new approach to survive and thrive. So I'm going to give you one or two really disheartening statistics, but don't get discouraged. This is a solvable problem. We still have time to survive the crisis and thrive. And what Move LA has started is exactly the approach we are recommending, which is inspired locally, okay, to make change globally. And what I'm arguing for is that climate change is already here. When we started making big noises starting from 2000, funnily, 21st century, okay, till then, nature was dominating year-to-year radiation. So what you see every decade worse than the next, progressively, not by 10%, not by 20%, by 100 to 200%. Let me just give you one example. California has suffered $200 billion of worth damages over the last 40 years, just natural disasters. Okay? It used to be somewhere between 1 to 5 billion a year. Since the last 20 years, it's gone to 10 to 20 billion a year. Okay? This is, climate change has no boundaries. The red states are suffering more. If you look at the top 4 states which have suffered the worst losses from climate disasters in the last 40 years, there's Texas, Louisiana. It's lost almost 300 billion for a small population. I don't know why these things have gone unnoticed. And Florida, all from storms. We have lost California about 250 billion, just only half of it. Okay? So our loss is 5 billion a year. So we need to protect people. And I worked with Francis, before that Pope Benedict, and we started a global movement on resilience. Resilience, so 3 pillars. Mitigation, we have to cut emissions. So I agree with everything Denny, Zane just said. Okay? Adaptation, we are spending only 5%. 95% goes to emission reduction. So I ask all of you, Los Angeles, if you spend all your funds, California is spending 85% on emission reduction, only 15% on adaptation. But that benefit is going to accrue globally. So we need to think about, my request to move LA and Denny Zane is that if you get 2 billion, fantastic. That's what we need. But kindly look at adaptation, at least 50%. So what do I mean by adaptation? And I said California is about 200 billion. Just one LA event this January is estimated to be somewhere between 70 billion to 200 billion. So our entire budget, in fact, California's budget is 300 billion. So we need to spend on adaptation. It's a long process. I just need 3 things. I'd like to fireproof, flood-proof, and heat stress-proof Californian homes. And we'd focus on all those earning below 50% of our, earning ability, the poor. Me, I'm a wealthy, well-paid professor from University of California. And my home is, of course, fossil fuel free, but if there is a heat stress, I'm going to jack up my heat pump. But how about the poor? How about our children? So those are the problem in planning for adaptation. There are amazing experts sitting at this table. There is nothing to compare. When you plan, you say, I'll go back to the last 10 years and figure out what terrain is, so I plan my future. Now, there is no more past, there's no more norm. I work closely with Jerry Brown, now I work with Governor Nixon. When I told this to Jerry Brown 9 years ago, nobody's going to insure our home, we have to start on this. And he said, Brown, what is a norm we can compare with? I said, there's no norm. So next day, it was on LA Times. There is only abnormal. You can ask how long? Since we're not bending that emissions curve, I have a program called Bending the Curve. Our emission is still increasing. Okay, it's gone to 38 billion tons. Okay? So, adaptation, they need to fireproof. And 3 things I told you. Second is normally what we do, even in California, our adaptation fund is just disaster response. When fires are burning, we have to do that, don't get me wrong. And if I lose my home, I'm not going to help me out. So I'm not saying that. But you see, what we are ignoring is systemic issues. And the systemic issues for California, as our sea level rise, it's going to go by 2.5 feet in another 25 years. And the other is water. What's happening in California is much of the rain is falling as water, rain, not snow. It's the snow accumulation which gives us water, right? So we need a sponge to suck up that water which is falling too fast, keep it in the land. In fact, there's a famous Chinese program called Sponge City. I think I'm going to have him invite here to work with some other administrators at meeting. The first person I met is from the water district. So we need to get clever. And all of this is going to, the economy is going to improve. So one last thing I want to say, and then I'll get back to you, Mr. Zane, is that those tremendous low-hanging fruits. We throw 40% of the food into the landfill. 40%. Imagine the carbon dioxide we consume, fossil fuel, we can produce it food. I've been after Jerry Brown to ban throwing food into landfill. Convert them to compost. Becomes fertilizer. See, that food in the landfill produces methane. Already, Mr. Zane has told us methane is a deadly super pollutant, heat trapping. So there are things like these. I would like to go after the waste in the emission index. But please don't forget adaptation. People are going to suffer. And so far, all my predictions have come true, unfortunately. But this one, I'm 80, so I'm not going to be alive to see if my predictions come true. But we are going to suffer. Our kids, with those who are in their 20s and 30s. So somehow we need to do the adaptation. And Los Angeles can't do all of it by itself. But, in this Pope Francis effort, in this global movement, we held a summit 2 months ago, just like folks like you, but our governor was there. And so we have sensitized all the government agencies, but a group like MODERATOR has to figure out what does it take to adapt. No one has estimated the cost of adaptation. Just this one event has cost us $150 billion. And we are expecting as scientists to get worse and worse and worse. Ultimately, the emissions curve will bend down. So don't get me wrong. I think short-lived climate pollution is one way to go. The soot from diesel has the same effect as 2,000 tons of CO2. And the soot is the worst air pollutant. So it's a double whammy. I was excited to see in the table diesel targeted. That's what it has to be. But if I want to make a plea here, adaptation has not been given sufficient attention in this document. What we are doing is we are protecting the planet's people. I want us to protect a little bit Los Angeles.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I would love to see some of the data. Because remember, as I stated earlier, we hold you in very high regard and esteem. We'll take your suggestions very seriously. Kobe, Sky, this is your topic as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Tell us what you think.
And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Denny, for assembling an incredible panel, and especially Dr. Ramanathan for talking about the importance of short-lived climate pollutants. It's something you've been doing for decades. And these super pollutants are just incredibly powerful in accelerating the speed at which our temperatures are increasing. But the opportunity, Denny, you explained it very well. If we can knock down the rate of those pollutants quickly, it buys us time for the other solutions for reducing CO2 more quickly. I think the priorities that you have are very much aligned with where the emissions are coming from. So power plants and transportation, those two sources are really important. If we have zero emission power, zero emission transportation, we're carbon neutral. That is the goal that we have to get to. Carbon neutral is great, but we need negative carbon. We need to pull CO2 and other carbon pollutants out of the atmosphere as quickly as possible. And that's where addressing super pollutants allows us to do that. And that means methane in particular. If we can, like Dr. Ramanathan said, get food waste out of our landfills, recover that material, and produce renewable energy with it, then we are, in effect, eliminating that source of pollution that is 86 times more potent pound per pound than CO2, and reducing how quickly we're accelerating climate change. If we can show how we do that in a cost-effective way here in LA, then we become a beacon for other states and other countries to do the same, as we've been doing in California for many years. The other big source, every time we have a massive wildfire, the amount of black carbon that's produced is devastating. It sets us back by years in terms of the progress that we make for reducing pollution. So we absolutely have to address that. I'm glad that addressing carbon pollution from all these different sources are here, but every major wildfire that we prevent also is so important as a short-lived climate pollutant solution, getting those super pollutants out. So I would say 10% is great. I would love to see that even higher because it's so important for us to address these super pollutants.
Thank you. So we've been hearing partly the sort of big picture, solutions-oriented thinking of advocates, but there are practitioners here on the panel that can talk to us more about how we do it. So if we're going to have a boatload of money, how do we spend it? So not just the categories, but what's the practicum of it? And as I spoke earlier, clean power is a foundational element here, because all of the rest of these solutions rely upon power. And so we have to ensure that that power is sufficient and that it's clean. And so we have a couple of people here who can talk to us about, what are the smart investments, or how would we use money that might be set aside for expanding our renewable power, our clean power. I'm going to ask Ted Bardacke to elaborate a bit about some of the ideas he shared with me about what's the process here? How do we make it happen? Ted? Ted, by the way, is introduce yourself in your organization.
Thank you. This on? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Oh, yeah. I'm Ted Bardacke. I'm CEO of Clean Power Alliance. We are the largest renewable energy provider, green energy provider in the United States, serving close to 1.1 million customers in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. We, over the last 7 years, made forward commitments and investments of about $11 billion in new renewable energy sources. Everything that we build in California is done under project labor agreements. We also fund IBW and pre-apprenticeship programs across the two counties, because we really believe that we need to not only generate the demand for the jobs, but the supply of the workers coming into those projects. And I kind of take the same view on the clean energy side. We need to both stimulate demand and provide supply. So I have 5 ideas for how to spend a boatload of money without making any endorsement. Without making any endorsement as to Denny's good stuff about how to raise the money. First, let's provide an incentive to any electricity provider in LA County who beats the law or is above compliance. So right now in California, we are all electricity providers like us are required to supply by 2030 60% renewable power. Let's pay those providers an extra amount of money if they beat the law, right? Let's not fund compliance, let's fund above compliance. Let's also make those payments conditional on those payments going directly to reduce electricity bills, because if the folks building our projects cannot afford their electricity bill, we're not really doing anything to help society very much. So that's idea number 1. Reward those who go above compliance. Second idea, there are over 200,000 electricity customers in Los Angeles County who currently have solar panels but do not have batteries. Let's put a battery in every one of those homes today for free under a direct install program funded by done by Union Labor. So we had Schwarzenegger do 1 million solar roofs. Let's do 1 million batteries. And when we do that, let's do something else. Let's have each one of those customers agree to go on to the very controversial new solar tariff. What does that do? It also reduces electricity costs for customers who don't have solar panels and batteries, who haven't been able to afford it, who haven't had that opportunity. So it helps those who've installed. It also helps those who haven't had that opportunity. So that's idea number 2.
Idea number 3 is every hospital in Southern California or across the state is under mandates to replace and upgrade their backup power systems by 2030. This is a problem for hospitals because the upgrading their diesel generators to meet new air quality standards is going to be very, very expensive. Let's put a hydrogen fuel cell in every single hospital in Los Angeles County with the requirement that those fuel cells be powered by green hydrogen, electrolysis-based hydrogen made with renewable energy. What we're doing here is we're solving a social problem of hospitals who will have to raise their prices for care in order to provide backup power. But we're also providing a strong, stable demand source for green hydrogen here in LA County where we want to produce it. And we need that clean market signal for investment. So that's idea number 3. Idea number 4, you see, it's a boatload of money. I got a boatload of ideas. Idea number 4, every gasoline station in LA County should be provided with a free 2-port DC fast electric charger. Let's make every gasoline station in LA County a multi-fuel dispenser station, where if your car is burning on gas, you can go there. If your car is powered by electricity, you can go there and you can get a charge. You already see that starting to happen, but I am very worried for the many gasoline station owners across LA County of how they're going to survive as gasoline sales decline. So let's give them the opportunity to sell other fuel and a few sodas and chips while you're waiting for your car to charge. Idea number 5, let's take every multifamily building in LA County and put in 1 EV charger for every 2 parking spots in that multifamily building, so that folks who live in multifamily apartments, that's more than half of the population of LA County, have equal opportunity access to EV charging infrastructure. Let's make sure that that's a direct install program done by union labor so that we're creating jobs, we're creating access, and we're reducing climate pollution. Thank you.
A boatload of ideas. All right. So, Clean Power Alliance over to LADWP. Now, LADWP, for those who aren't familiar with the landscape and utilities, is a public utility owned by the city of Los Angeles. There are other public utilities owned by Pasadena, Glendale, Burbank, blah, 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 several. And then there is the private regulated utility, Edison, which provides power in most of the rest of the county. That's not one of those municipal type operators. Exactly how, Ted's Clean Power Alliance fits in there is a kind of mystery to me, but we'll understand it soon. LADWP, under, I guess, Garcetti regime, said the law says you have to be 100% renewable power by 2045. They said, we're going to try to make it by 2035. Now, that sounds to me like an ambition that might need a boatload of money. What do you think?
Well, thank you for inviting me today. You are right. We do have that goal of 2035, and we have developed plans to get us there. And we are definitely committed to that goal. I think today the customers we serve with 62% on net zero energy, and we're on our way. Very proud of that goal. I think 2 points that I wanted to raise, and I'm glad you raised the fact that we're a publicly owned utility, because I think there's some differential experiences that we have operating in that space. But the first point I'd really like to raise is to echo Dr. Ramanathan's recommendation around climate adaptation. I think that's incredibly important. And I think when we think about adaptation spending, oftentimes we think about just how do we help our customers be more resilient to emergencies? But really, resiliency also is about how do we help our customers participate in the energy transition that's occurring, and that they too have the access to the benefits that we're trying to achieve for everybody. One of the things that California law prohibits is for publicly owned utilities, we are not able to take ratepayer funds from certain ratepayers and target them towards other ratepayers. So we're not able to target ratepayer funds in a specified way. And so what that means is then we want to have specialized programs that really support our most vulnerable customers to raise their resiliency so that they can deal with disasters, but also participate in this clean energy transition. We really need to look for alternative sources of funding. And so one of the ways that we fund our programs that are targeted towards our vulnerable customers is through funding from the cap and trade program. And so that's one funding source that's very important to us, but it is far too little to really make the impact that we need to make going forward. So I would say when we look at the different kinds of climate adaptation investments or even climate mitigation investments, public funding for a publicly owned utility, if it's not ratepayer funds, it's additional public funds. I think probably the most important use is to be able to target certain customers based on the needs they have. So as you mentioned, for example, in multifamily housing, how do we get residents who they don't own the building, they can't put solar on the roof? How do we help them participate in this clean energy transition? That's incredibly important. The other thing I would raise is that the build is absolutely true in terms of what needs to happen. I think just in our plans, for example, if you look at the last 5 years, and we had to deal with COVID, so there was some challenges. But if we look at the deployment of renewables over the last 5 years versus what we need to do on a yearly basis over the next 10 years, we need to grow that by a factor of 3. And so 3.5, more than 3. And the same thing for energy storage. And this is in order to get that other 38% clean, but it's also because the pie is growing so fast, because we are electrifying and because so much of we need to power the rest of the economy, as you said. And so when I think about the funding that might go towards clean power, for example, I might think about, well, funding is great, but how is it going to be used? And so I don't know that we need necessarily more people buying or selling renewables, but where are the bottlenecks occurring within that production chain and within that market so that those bottlenecks can be addressed and the market can proceed. Right now, we're seeing, everybody's in the market doing RFPs, doing solicitations for clean power projects, and everybody's bidding on the same projects, but they want those high quality projects that have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. And you start to see prices rise. So how does government funding and public funding start to help perhaps, get more suppliers into that high level category? You look at things like some of the public funding that was coming out of Washington. I do think that was trying to target these kinds of principles. If you look at sort of DOE's loan program, for example, over the last 5 years, they were able to take public funds and really leverage it for a great amount of private investment. That loan office has since been closed or shrunk significantly, but those kinds of examples are the kind that I would recommend we look to. I guess one last thing I would just say is I think also where there's a bottleneck in terms of infrastructure build out is in workforce training. I think we have, there's this gap. If you're talking about a practitioner like the Department of Water and Power, we can use ratepayer funds to train our new employees. And we do some community giving, but we can't train the vast workforce that's not going to come into our department because that's not what we're allowed to use ratepayer funds for. So there's a big gap in terms of workforce training, and I think that's something that should be on your list as well.
I think you're going to have to sit down and go over that list and get a little greater specificity and understanding as to what these complicated entities called utilities really need. Thank you very much for your input there. So we've heard several people reference the need for electrolytic hydrogen as part of the solution, especially in the goods movement sector, especially as an alternative to diesel. We've heard people say that diesel is more than the worst air pollutant. It's also one of the worst climate pollutants. It's also second to cigarettes as a source of lung cancer. So it is a multifaceted problem that we need to address. And one of the challenges, when EV batteries have done well on light duty and they do well on short haul trucking, but it's the long haul trucking that's really the larger source of our emissions, if I'm correct about that. So I want to hear from Tanya Peacock first about what the Hydrogen Business Council, how they view this prospect of investments potentially in electrolytic hydrogen. Is that a welcome? I'm sure it's welcome, but is that a source of great enthusiasm, or is your industry eager to be partners in making this happen? What do you think? What kind of advice would you give us?
Right. Is this one on? Yeah, there we go. So I come to this from the hydrogen perspective. Certainly, I am a board member of the California Hydrogen Business Council, which is the largest and most well-established hydrogen trade association in California, and we represent producers, technology providers, automobile manufacturers, utilities. So we have a broad range of membership across the hydrogen supply chain. And then I also come to this as a board member of First Public Hydrogen, which was recently formed. And I bring this up because it's really an example of local government seeing a need and a gap and stepping up. So what First Public Hydrogen is the first public hydrogen utility in the US, if not the world. It was formed through a joint powers alliance, using joint powers authority, which is something California state law allows local governments to come together to work on policy priorities and other items. And so the city of Lancaster and the city of Industry formed this joint powers authority and then formed First Public Hydrogen. And they are actively recruiting other public entities. I think Roland Water District just joined, but it's really, the idea is that public entities throughout California can join as members, and the purpose of it is to work on that challenge in the hydrogen industry of connecting producers and users. And so First Public you can't get your clean hydrogen project built if you don't have an off-taker. So First Public is going to aggregate the supply, find these long-term off-take agreements, and then work on delivering it to those end users. And the first end users are transit authorities, also looking at the ports, because there's a great opportunity to decarbonize ports, both on the drayage trucks, and then also the port handling, cargo handling equipment. And I'm sure Bonnie will perhaps talk a little bit more about this. So there are opportunities where, battery electric zero emission technology makes sense, and others where the hydrogen technology really works well for the requirements of the duty cycle. So all to say, so that's First Public's mission, and just went out with an RFP for hydrogen supplies. And what's going to be needed more than ever before now is, since the federal support for various hydrogen tax credits and so on is up in the air, and there's a DOE funded hub in the ports of LA, Arches, which is focused on the ports but broader than that. And the purpose of that was to really demonstrate the hydrogen ecosystem and how hydrogen can really help to decarbonize the whole port complex. So all to say, Denny, your initiative is very timely, and so this, accelerating the deployment of zero emission heavy duty equipment, and then on and off road vehicles, and the associated fueling infrastructure is going to be really key to getting the hydrogen marketplace allowing it to continue to expand with funding that will have immediate benefits for local communities. And we're not starting from scratch. The technology is tested in the port of LA in particular. There's some demonstration projects which are ready to be commercialized. I think there's some projects in the port of Long Beach too. Ready to be commercialized. It's just going to be additional funding to get them beyond from the demonstration stage to the commercialization stage. So I can go on and on about hydrogen, but and Ted, I was very happy to hear that one of your item number 3 for hospitals. It's a great, so there's a transportation application for hydrogen, but also to get rid of diesel backup generators. And so for hospitals, I would really, really hope that for, the World Cup games, for the Olympics, that the city isn't going to be depending on diesel backup generation for power needs. And there really is an opportunity for proven technology that's hydrogen based to avoid diesel. And then one thing I do want to say too is, and this is along the lines of reducing short-lived climate pollutants, you can produce hydrogen from renewable electricity using an electrolyzer. You can also produce it from diverted organic waste. So you can take biomethane, biogas that is coming off of landfills because the organic waste hasn't been diverted, or you divert it and you digest it and you turn it to biogas, and then it can become hydrogen. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at all of the clean hydrogen production pathways and not arbitrarily limiting funding to just one. So thank you.
All right, so after some of that, in this measure, I think that we would want to limit funding with respect to hydrogen only to zero emission green hydrogen electrolytic. There's debate about biomass, but I think that's worth being in the debate for sure. Is your industry willing and able to accept that kind of, we're not asking you to, might they endorse, if you would, a measure that had such a constraint and, for example, would not accept or support, and that doesn't mean we'd outlaw it, but we just wouldn't want to fund it, hydrogen produced from methane.
Well, from fossil methane.
From fossil methane.
But from biomethane, I do think that needs to be included.
I think in biomethane, there's going to be issues from different, it's not just one thing. So,
well, you have the diverted organic waste.
That might be the easy one.
That's the easy one.
But then this controversy, I want to make sure that we have a debate and have the controversial.
Right. There's controversy over lots of things, that you also have to make sure that you have the big picture in mind, which is reducing methane and reducing carbon emissions.
I do. So the second thing is that there has been some notable problems in the production of hydrogen-powered trucks around fuel cell-powered trucks around the country, with some companies declaring bankruptcy, etc. And some people take from that, the industry isn't ready. Others say, real problem is they don't have any fueling infrastructure. What do you have to say about that? Is there a fundamental problem, or is this just an infrastructure problem?
It's an infrastructure problem, and it's also a funding problem for some of these technology providers. So I was just at the Advanced Clean Transportation Expo last week, 2 weeks ago in Anaheim, and walking through that expo hall, I was really surprised the extent of the hydrogen related so from hydrogen trucks to hydrogen refueling technology to hydrogen storage technology. So it's not a structural, it's not a essential problem with hydrogen. It's a very solvable challenge, which with funding and more support can really be overcome. And I got to ride in, Hyundai has a new hydrogen fuel cell truck, a Class 8 tractor. And
talking to the people doing the riding drive, the test drive. So talking with him, he's a local owner operator. He right now is driving a diesel Kenmore, and he said he would, if there were fueling infrastructure and incentives to overcome the cost differential, he would trade in his diesel truck for this Hyundai hydrogen fuel cell truck in a heartbeat. He said after 11 hours in a diesel truck, he feels like he can't, he's all shaken up and he can't breathe and he's filthy. And after 11 hours in a hydrogen truck, he said he would be, absolutely fine.
He's ready to go out dancing, huh?
He's ready to go out dancing. Exactly. Ready to go out dancing.
So Alma, we're Alma Marquez. Arches. So what's happening with Arches? Arches, for those who don't know, is will you describe it?
Yeah. So my name is Alma Marquez, and I'm the Workforce Development Manager for Arches. Arches is the Alliance for Clean Renewable Energy System. So we're a statewide, private, public entity, and our job is to work with people like Therapy, people like Ted, on different hydrogen projects throughout the state. Regarding the funding, we're $1.2 billion is on the chopping block right now with the Department of Energy. So to answer your question, Denny, we would want the money because as we've talked about the demand is there, but because we don't have enough funding for these projects, they're going under. So this funding would really support the projects that we have in our pipeline right now. We have a little bit over 40 projects that are already starting in different sectors, hard to electrify producers, gasoline stations. We're working with the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach, Port of Oakland on some of these projects already. The funding is not enough, as we all know. So we're also working with the workforce development, working with labor and union to make sure that the training is there, because not only do we have a big need for these projects, but we also need to train the workforce for these good paying jobs that we really need. We're really behind. Having grown up in Wilmington, California, one of the most toxic communities in the city of LA, that was pretty real. And, I can't see it getting any worse. I completely agree with the professors here that, we really have to get to removing black carbon because it's very real in the city of LA, county of LA. So I really love what I'm doing now, working with Arches, because I really do see what's happening and what we could do. And this funding would be amazing. And as someone else mentioned, it's very timely for this initiative to happen here in the county. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, isn't Arches in part a labor-led effort?
Yes, it is. They're one of our key partners.
Building trades in particular, am I correct?
California building trades.
Right. And just as a side note, I know Alma for many years because her younger sister and her then husband worked as early staff members at Move LA.
Yes, that is correct.
So there we are. It's anyway, Bonnie, Nixon. So the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles have a lot at stake in this whole discussion, don't they? And a lot of opportunity. So what do you think about a boatload of money? Is that
I'd like to call it a shipload of money. How about that? Or a vessel load of money, because it's going to take a lot and to do what's necessary. I come to this, I'm also a professor, doctor at UCLA and USC as well. And I consider myself, definitely an academic and researcher, also pragmatist. I've been working in this space for about 43 years now. I want to share I moved to San Pedro about 4 years ago and built a really cute little cottage. It was a manufactured home and has a light gray bamboo deck and white furniture out on my deck. And within a week, I was like, what is this black soot that's all over everything? As I swept my deck and as I continue to sweep my deck and clean my furniture weekly, that is what I live in. And for that reason, I decided to go work at the port and see if I could be part of the solution. Because that's what one of my neighbors said, is this is coming from the port. And so I'm working for a company that's called Long Beach Container Terminal, and it is one of the more unusual terminals in the port. You can go online and just go lbct.com, and you will find this report and two preceding reports that I developed. And it is generally fully electrified. There are 93 cranes that are electrified. We have spent, the family that owned the complex prior to 2018, when it was a forced sale, and the port have spent about $2.5 billion to redevelop the site and electrify all the cranes. It is, right now, when I got there, I said, I spoke to the management and said, are you willing to go all the way? Like every single piece of fossil fuel left on this terminal to transition over to electric, because we do have the adequate power. We are powered by Southern California Edison, and they have given us enough substation capacity to do what's necessary to electrify. As a resident of San Pedro and as a partner with all of the terminals in San Pedro, they recently received EPA Clean Ports money to the tune of $450 million, but I will be surprised if they can spend it, because LADWP is not committed, or has not been able to commit to providing all the power and the capacity they need to shift over. I should say that every shift that occurs, especially if there's any federal or state funding attached or grants attached to it, will be for human-operated equipment to stay, to be electrified. Yes, the technology exists. I was with at the same conference that Tanya was at, and there are absolutely trucks that are battery electric and can do the job today. And the main trucks on terminals that really are the workhorses are yard tractors or terminal trucks. And they represent the bulk of diesel emissions. And just for folks that don't understand, diesel is absolutely deadly. Diesel is nitrous oxide, sulfur oxide, and particulate matter 2.5 and 10. And that is created from combustion. And it is what we breathe in. It is the reason that Los Angeles has the highest childhood asthma rates in the country. It is the reason that we are the second most severe non-attainment zone in the country. Believe it or not, Bakersfield is the first most severe non-attainment zone. While they already had a fairly bad situation with refineries and crop and agricultural activities, they now have all the warehouses that bring the trucks that idle. So, I mean, similar to Fernando, I do believe that it's important, and this is unusual coming out of a private sector company, that we have the carrot and the stick, that we have guidelines, and that there are regulations and to move us forward. I believe those make a difference. But at the same time, I think we need the clear incentives, and we need to provide the infrastructure for everybody to make this shift. I don't think the feds are going to be stepping up as aggressively as they have in the last 4 years. I literally flew from DC today and spent the week with them. And there is no question that we've got a very different sentiment in DC, and it's a drill baby drill sentiment. And I also think the state budget is pretty desperate as well, particularly with the wildfires and the budget deficit that's even been created in the past couple of weeks as a result of tariffs. So we need to move locally. So I am very supportive, Denny, of this local ballot measure. I believe we need to move locally to protect our quality of life here in Los Angeles. I believe we need to protect our children's futures. And we need to provide resiliency for this region. You know, San Pedro is a complex that there are 5 communities that surround the port. It's West Long Beach, Gardena, Carson, Wilmington, and San Pedro. And those communities suffer as a result of the activity that provides 40% of the goods to the country. So this isn't just a local issue. It is really a national issue. someone in Minnesota expects their couch, but a child in San Pedro gets asthma. So we really need to think about this. My last point is really that I think how to spend a shipload of dollars is about, I want to make a plea for focus. I do see so many competing priorities and things we need to do. I look at the fact that the power plants were supposed to have scrubbers in 2018, and when Trump came into power, he eliminated that. And we're looking at, and then the waiver, and then the clean truck fee, and we're fighting with things that are really difficult right now. But we need to focus, and I believe it's get the power, put in the infrastructure, and buy the equipment. And because today the equipment exists, and we need to address where these bottlenecks are. I also just want to say there are many other industrial facilities that need to be regulated. And I do actually believe the feds may help us on the workforce training front. So, and I just want to make one last point on the hydrogen. Again, as a pragmatist and as a business that's based in Long Beach and works in the port, hydrogen right now today is very expensive, and the distribution infrastructure does not exist. And there is a competition, and then the refineries will largely go after gray and black hydrogen. We only really want green and blue. But I believe that we should reserve hydrogen and the potential distribution for the long haul drayage trucks, for the ships going across the oceans, and the locomotives. And I think that focus should be there, and that where we can electrify, that we should electrify and provide the adequate structure. I love the idea of every gas station also providing. I have an electric car, and there are times where I struggle a little bit, and I think we need to improve our infrastructure. So I am a supporter of a multi-fuel future, and but I also think we need to be very pragmatic and very focused, and we definitely need this money to go to this area. So whatever we need to do to support that.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. So I'm going to turn now to some of our prior coalition partners. Move LA, when we started working initially, trying to create a boatload of money for transit, through Measure R and Measure M, our principal partners were the labor movement, the building trades in particular, but also the engineering and construction management world, who for very good reasons saw themselves designing and building with the workforce, making the investments real that we wanted to make in transit. Same thing happened when we were working on our housing measures. These are all build programs. And this is a build program, I think. And I want to, first of all, ask Eddie Alvarez, who's the LA County, the representative of the what?
That's me.
On the LA Orange County Building Trades Council. He's representing the workforce in Los Angeles County in that institution. Key partner for us in all the things that we've done thus far. I want to get your take on all this, Eddie, and hopefully it's encouraging.
I mean, got like how many months? I'm just kidding. So hi, Eddie Alvarez, LAOC Building Trades. As my boss said in the opening remarks this afternoon, we represent over 106,000 construction workers in all sectors from construction and energy. But I actually like to say that we represent all construction workers, non-represented and union, to make sure that they have safe working conditions, they get paid a good wage, and they have a high point in the middle class. Thank you, brother. I think that's our basics of what we do. A couple of things here. Obviously, we want to thank everybody that builds union and all our partners up here who have worked with us to make sure that all the jobs that are connected with this are going to be built through a skilled and trained workforce. What I like to say, the best skilled and trained workforce in America is right here in Southern California, including San Diego. See my sister from San Diego down there, Gretchen. But But, part of this is we are in a bit of conundrum here. A year ago, I would have gone up here and said, hey, we have a great partner at the federal government. We are going to do what we need to do to get a lot of this happening. This is going to be a partnership here for the next 5.5 years. So obviously that's not happening. So we're all going to have to pay for this on our own. And I want to stress the pay for it. What I see a problem, we were just in Sacramento for the last 4 days, a couple of us in this room, stressing of how we're going to pay for all this. One of the things that I think that is left behind is the people who are actually paying for it. We are at the building trades very much all in on the energy, may it be from oil, the hydrogen, solar to SaaS, gas. But I think one of the things that we need to do is not look for let the perfect get in the way of the good here. We can still refine oil here, and I think we have to. And here's why. I drive a plug-in hybrid vehicle, right? And it's great. I love it. The problem is we are now closing refineries here in California at an unbelievable pace, which is what a lot of you in the room want to do, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Actually, the problem is that we're not going to bring that oil from places that have no labor standards, no civil rights, and we do not know how they're refining that oil and how they're getting it out of the ground, which creates a very much ethical problem. And we are putting it on petroleum tankers that are coming across seas with that dirty diesel that's being made somewhere else. So while we're transitioning, and I don't like saying transition, while we follow our work into the clean hydrogen or clean energy sector, we need to remember that we still have oil that is needed here in this area. And the best way is not to let somebody else deal with it, because even our friends in Texas are not going to refine it as we're going to do it here. We need to invest in the refineries that we still have open here, make sure that they're allowed to clean the refineries at the highest single level, right? So when they're producing that gas, where they're producing that oil, right, is done here. We're eventually are transitioning from. Let's just take my truck. I have a Chevy truck which now gets 23 miles to the gallon. I love it. I love my truck. But 20 years ago, we were getting 10 miles to the gallon on that. So just in that technology, we are lessening the use of oil just on everyday use as technology gets better, right? So as we transition, as we move into these cleaner fuels, remember that we still have fossil fuels that are being produced here in America that we can produce here, produce good jobs, right? Let's not forget that a worker in the refinery is making somewhere between $45 and $75 an hour with full benefits and 100% healthcare, with maybe not a college degree, right? And a lot of those folks are black and brown. I'm going to tell you the majority of those folks are black and brown. Not most of them. The majority of those folks are black and brown. So if we all of a sudden extract all those jobs, where are we going to put them? This is great. I love it. This is what we want to do. We're going to invest heavily into this. But we got to remember what ramifications are, because we go down to 5, if we go down to 10, and we go down to 110, I can tell you how many hydrogen stations, electrical plug-in stations we have right now. Anybody tell me? There's one hydrogen station in Cal State, LA. We go down, how many Tesla stations we have from here to San Pedro? 0. Okay? So if we're really, really, really going to invest, we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. We cannot do that. It hurts our economy and it hurts our environment. 100% hurts our environment, because we are letting somebody else do the work. We are letting them do the work at a much lower standard than we do it here in California. Right? And I, as we're talking this, we're all going to do this. We are all in on this. None of us in this table are saying no, but there is going to be a ripple effect if we decide not to do it the right way. Right? Not to do it the right way. And this is the right way to do it. Because if we allow other countries, we have American energy right here that we can, in California, that we can harvest to make sure that we do it the way we want them to do it. Chevron's going somewhere else. 76 wants to go somewhere. Marathon wants to go somewhere else. And they're going to go somewhere they can do it cheaper with less labor standards. 100% guarantee you that's what they're doing. Right? And if they're doing it in the middle, if they can bring the oil from the Middle East at 50 cents a gallon and sell it to us back at $7 a gallon, shit, that's pretty good in my opinion. Right? So just think about that as we're all doing this, because we are going to, the building trade, I can tell you, is going to invest heavily into this bond. right? Because that's what we do. Last year we spent a lot of money to get $13 billion in bonds in the state of California through education, and mostly in education actually. And we are proud of that. But we cannot let the workers behind. Just saying, hey, they're going to let somebody else doing it. That is a problem that we have done for so long. We're going to let somebody else worry about it. And what happens? Oh, Mr. Trump wins. Right? So if we're going to get into this, we have to look at it every single time. Most of our members that live in all those areas that I talked about, we have to drive on average 45 minutes a day to get to our job site, an hour to our job site. We leave at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? Healthcare, childcare, all the stuff that we need to worry about, right? It are things that most of us can't do at 4 a.m. in the morning, correct? But we have to, because we make America run, right? We make America run. So as you want to do all these things, and remember, when you're talking to your friends who are in the green energy zone or in the environmental justice sector, remember there's a worker for every job that we close the refinery. That's a job, right? Who's making maybe $65 an hour, who maybe, by the way, on their second and third chance in life. Maybe they were locked up. Maybe they went to college. And said, hey, I got $45,000 in debt. I don't want to do that anymore. I think I can do this better. All right. So when we take those jobs away, there's going to be somewhere we need to put them. So we're going to build a union. We're going to invest heavily into this as you should, but we need to make sure what the ramifications are. Like I said, we're getting no help from the federal government now. No, that's gone. We're going to Metro. We're going with Metro in a couple months to get whatever we were supposed to get to make sure we're going to get. So we ask that as you get all these programs going, or as we clean our air, which we want. We all want clean water. Matt Gaines said something in the room. I lived in Highland Park and in Tohono growing up. I remember when I was 5 years old at Plainview Elementary, not going outside because we couldn't see the mountains in Tohono. It's right there. All right. We've made so much progress, but let's remember, we can do it right here in California. If we work with our refinery partners and say, hey, look, we want you to stay, but these are the rules you got to play by, they'll stay. But if we just say, you got to close, you don't like it, tough, we're looking at $9 a gallon of gas. And no one in the neighborhoods where our members live can afford that. Nobody. I know I can't, right? And I make pretty good money, right? So let's remember that. So we're 100% in on this. We're going to have boots on the ground. We're going to write checks. We're going to make sure that we get these projects crossed, right? And we expect you to be with those boots on the ground with us. Don't just give us lip service. Yeah, we're with you. Yeah, but I can't knock a door this Saturday. I got a thing with a guy who's coming up. Got to go knock on those doors. That's the only way we're going to get this crossed. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you. Another partner of longstanding, Mike Aparicio, was, that underground system we call in the downtown area, we call it the regional connector. A regional connector, that's not a name for kind of that. And then the subway. Skanska, under Mike Aparicio's leadership, was building both of those projects, and probably a whole lot more. I don't even remember Mike, because Mike was really the guy in the engineering world, the construction management world, that was making it happen here in LA. He's retired now. He's here, but I want to hear from Mike what you think about this whole effort.
Well, thanks, Denny. Yeah, I'm still working some. I'm not fully retired. And I think you have cooked up something that's very valuable for us as Angelinos in Southern California and stuff. We are builders. The building industry, the building trades are a big partner in building the Los Angeles basin, Southern California. We're going to show up. We're going to be all behind this, because the word we heard over and over again today, all the speakers, was infrastructure. We're very proud and capable of showing up on all levels of infrastructure, whether it's charging, whether it's hydrogen. We've been partnered right now with a really interesting technology down in Lake Forest in Orange County, fusion. There is a mini fusion reactor that they're playing with, a company called TAE. You can go and Google them. It is incredible. It's in a business park there in Orange County. They're backed by big money with, I think it's Google, and it is awesome to see how close they are to fusion energy. I think that's going to happen. We've been hearing from some of the hydrogen partners, and of course charging, which everybody's talking about. Ted, we would love to build all those gas stations up in terms of electric charging. A couple other projects that are on the horizon, maybe they would draw out of this. There's one very real project that's getting close that Trump is actually saying he's behind. That's the high-speed rail train from Rancho Cucamonga to Vegas. Right line. I've been working on that job for like 10 years. It's getting real close right now, and it's very interesting. The federal administration is saying, hey, we like that project. Maybe. So it's curious. So our industry is going to show up big with this, Denny, along with the building trades, because it creates infrastructure. Our parent companies, largely now, the builders have really changed. Big contracting, the big engineering firms, we all have massive sustainability targets set on ourselves. And our parents are from Sweden, extremely green company. They love the West Coast. They love Los Angeles, Southern California. So this is an initiative. We'll be right behind it, Denny. So going to be interesting where it goes, listening to all the different aspects of this. But the working people in Los Angeles, the builders here will respond to this with a lot of enthusiasm. Thanks, Denny.
Great. I love that assessment. So every time we have one of these programmatic panels where we're going to roll out some measure like this, I asked Cecilia Estolano to join the panel and give me the word. Are we on to something? Or should I go retire and just, go to Paris?
You might want to consider Paris. No, I'm going to say
Do
this.
Paris anyway.
I would like to go to Paris, definitely. All right, so I have the worst job in the world, which is like I'm between you and a cocktail. So, and myself and a cocktail. Okay, so a couple things. One is, as you saw from Denny's presentation, folks know how to do this. This guy has thought up these things. They know how to do. They have a great model of building coalitions that are durable, that are powerful, and effective. And we've got 4 measures to show for it, right? They're very different measures, and they were successful. So that's really important. It's a great track record. But things are a little different right now. And a lot of the speakers have alluded to that. It's not like we've always had a great administration in Washington. We haven't. But here's what's different. We have an actively hostile administration, like aggressively hostile. That's all about trying to make us feel disempowered. It's trying to undermine our democracy. It's trying to make us feel like we are powerless. So I've thought a lot about this, listening to all the speakers and being somebody who's worked on a lot of these measures, and I thought I'm always the hopeful person. And I'm somebody who had to leave my home in Altadena. I've been affected by the fires as well. I no longer live in the community I loved. And I realized how demoralized I felt. I don't feel like Southern California is the place that it used to be, partly because it's really not affordable. We are really facing headwinds economically, and this disaster has just knocked us off of. It's really been tough. It hit the Palisades, which those of you who are in politics know that's a prime place for Democrats to raise money, right? It hit Altadena, incredibly culturally rich place. And I don't know about you, but I think everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who's affected. So I don't want to go off on you talked a lot about fires, and I will say one thing. Let us not call them wildfires. They were firestorms. There's nothing wild about it. The fuel was our houses. It wasn't the trees. Our homes were the fuel. It was the wind. And Denny, you're right. It was the wind it's a firestorm. So if I could take every bit of documentation on the fires, say they were firestorms. Stop calling them wildfires, because to the doctor's good point, it's about adaptation, people. Okay, so here's what I think. I think you're onto something. I know you're onto something. I always pay attention when you make that call to me. But I think we need to be very explicit about why this matters. What is the antidote to federal tyranny that's anti-democratic, that's trying to make you feel that you should turn on each other and report on each other? What is the antidote to making you feel like everything you believed in is under attack and is going away, where you have to wonder why you're safe in your own country? What's the antidote to that? Local action and more democracy. That's the antidote to that. What can we do as this amazing region to stand up about what we believe in? We believe we can have a vital economy that raises everybody up, and we have a clean and fair economy. We've done it before. We've just done a really crappy job on delivery sometimes, okay? And we have lost our faith in our own institutions to deliver locally. Let's be honest about that. So if we're talking about asking people to tax themselves or a partial tax, we need to approach it differently. Number one, this is not about inputs. It's great to raise $1.5 to $2 billion a year. That's fantastic. It's about outcomes. We have to promise people we will deliver results. Delivery by a certain date of something real. Okay? It can't be, I'm going to raise a lot of money and I'm going to do a million things. I believe that focus is also important, but you have to make it real to people. So I believe you're right about the adaptation piece. We can talk about firefighting. That's not what we say. And we should not use the word adaptation because it doesn't mean anything to real people. But if you tell people, I'm going to find a way so that you will not have people die in your house from excessive heat, your house won't be prone to flooding. You'll be able to get power when there's a brownout or a blackout. You'll be safe. You'll have the infrastructure. You'll have places where your neighbors can gather, places like your churches, your schools, your parks. You can go there and be safe the next time there's a firestorm, because there will be one. And everybody in LA now is afraid it's going to affect them, because it affected places that probably, I don't know about Palisades, but the flats in Altadena, we're really far from the wildlife. So that adaptation piece is really important, Denny, and I think the measure gets at it a little bit. I think we need to change the rhetoric a little bit so that it appeals to people who not just had their homes destroyed, because people said that Altadena to me in a community meeting last week for the Blue Ribbon Commission. They said, the fuel's already gone. We're fine. If we get to rebuild our house, fuel's basically gone. Everything got burned down already. It's about other communities in LA. How do we make sure other communities in LA are going to be safe? And that's what we have to appeal to people in this measure, right? So I think one of those things is really hit hard on what are we doing to make safe, clean, healthy, connected places. Because what's the other antidote to fascism? I'm just going to name it, is connection with each other. And what I have always loved about these measures is connects labor, environmentalists, frontline communities, affordable housing advocates, wacky people with dreams, transportation nerds, people who just love trains. I mean, wacky people get together and get super excited and walk precincts in a huge county. That is really rad. That's the antidote to fascism and tyranny from the federal government. A couple more things. I don't want to lose this piece. It sounds super technical, but it was really important from Kendall, from LADWP. Yes, it's detailed. We can leverage these dollars and let them go farther, because we had a great model with the federal government in those carbon energy loan programs, right? The things that the Biden administration passed were really good. They just didn't deliver them fast enough, okay? So, but that idea of taking a sum of money and having private capital be attracted by that government-backed money is really important. I think our money could go farther, Denny. And I think you should sit down with our friends at DWP and other utilities and say, How can we take a piece of that DOE program and make it local? Do our own version. So obviously it could be way smaller, but make it targeted and make our money go farther. Okay, couple more and I'll be done because I want to go have a cocktail. Okay, a couple of other things. Affordability. Ted, I love you. I love what you're saying. I love anybody that comes in with 5 very specific ideas, but I also love what you said about affordability. You said we should be funding energy providers that basically beat the deadlines, that do it ahead of time. We should be giving them an incentive, a reward, but only if it's tied to affordability. Only if the electric bills are not going up. Right now, we have a vast problem with affordability for electricity. We're saying we want to go all electric and a little hydrogen here. It's not going to fly if the electric bills continue to increase 66% over 10 years. That is not feasible, and it's not fair, and we shouldn't be selling that. So we have to figure an affordability piece out, otherwise we can't sell this in public. People aren't stupid. I don't even get walking. I know like I'm talking about like anything in this or utilities. And I know I appreciate municipal utilities. Okay, and I guess I have one more piece, and that is listening, deep listening. So I told you we got to deliver. We have to have deadlines. We got to make it happen fast. And that was the failure of this last administration that we lost. Okay. Well, there's lots of them, but that's a big one. Enormous pieces of legislation like we hadn't seen in 60 years, but we didn't deliver the goods fast enough. Doug Carson's one of my favorite secret lawyers in the state, just started a lot. It's too bad because he's really great. But I want to say, Fernando, I agree with you. We can't just like throw out all of the planning and all of that, and we have to listen to people deeply. Do it up front, do it effectively, fund community groups to do that deep listening, and then everybody, we need to build fast. We don't have time. Like, agree on what we're doing, listen to the community, have the community co-design the programs with you, co-design the accountability measures within this funding measure together, make sure there are actual human beings from communities sitting on oversight bodies, fund them to sit on those oversight bodies, and have like measurable goals that they have to report on, that these people have to report on. But my God, we have got to build this stuff faster, because we have to tell people that if you commit to pay more money, you're going to actually have a benefit within your own friggin' lifetime. Because I remember when I took over Better World Group in 2018, we did some strategic planning, and we were thinking like, wow, we have 12 years to turn the curve on climate change. We have only 12 years. I know we're almost done. Almost done. We're only 12 years. Well, we're like halfway through that now, folks. So we got to go. Anyway, that's it. Those are my last points. Sorry, Dr. Tabor. Love you, man. And down.
Yeah. I did chill for